Marley One Love is about, well, Bob Marley, and more specifically about how after he survives an assassination attempt, he must use his music to ensure peace in his country. If I'm being completely honest, I consider Bob Marley to be one of the greatest artists of all time. His music, his writing, and his attitude were an absolute inspiration. So needless to say, despite the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of buzz surrounding this movie, I was still really excited to see it. And I do think we can get the two best parts of this movie out of the way, since going into it, I kind of already knew they were going to be the best parts about it. First of all, the soundtrack. Obviously, the soundtrack is amazing. It's all Bob Marley's music, and it's all awesome. And the other best part about this movie is Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob Marley himself. He nailed this performance. Not for 1 second did I see the actor underneath. Kingsley perfectly nails the overall vibe that Bob Marley had. Always down to earth, but never ignorant. Always extremely human and vulnerable. Yet at the same time, from the outside, it seems like bullets would just bounce off of him. It is a great performance, and although it's definitely too early in the year to call it one of the year's best performances, it wouldn't surprise me if by December, this was one of the big ones. But along with that, I would honestly say that the acting from every single cast member in this movie is overall really good, especially Lashana Lynch as Rita Marley. She is definitely the dramatic anchor that this movie really needed, especially telling the story of Bob Marley. And yet at the same time, I feel like this is a performance that's easily going to be forgotten about in favor of Kingsley's, which shouldn't happen. She stands toe-to-toe with Kingsley in a lot of scenes, and in my opinion, she's just as good as him in this movie. The cinematography in this movie is absolutely gorgeous. Jamaica in this movie looks beautiful. Whenever Bob is on his home island, it's always beautifully vibrant. But when he goes to other places where his heart really isn't in the right place at the time, it's so much visually more dull to match the script's more somber attitude towards these locations. And that does lead into what's probably the thing about this movie that makes me love it the most. And I'll be honest, all of those aspects on their own are already really good, but to be honest, they wouldn't really get me to really love this movie. What really gets me to love this movie is just the overall attitude that it has. The movie rarely ever is happy-go-lucky, but it always has this down-to-earth human vibe that Bob Marley himself practically trademarked. Whenever you're watching him talk to one of his band members in the movie, or whenever he's even talking to Rita, I'll be honest, half the time I couldn't really fully understand everything they were saying because the accents are just that thick. But truth be told, during those moments, I didn't really care because I understood all of the emotions. Whether it was through the acting, the writing, or the direction, every single emotion that this movie conveyed, you understood. To the point where I was honestly getting teary-eyed multiple points during the third act of this film. That said, as much as I liked the first and third act of this film, the second act is definitely the weakest. Not that it's necessarily bad, it's just definitely the most cliched part of the movie. That's where all of the classic pop singer and band storylines that we've come to know and get tired of come into play. The montage of success, the third act breakup, the evil manager or promoter. They're not necessarily awful aspects of the movie, but they are tired and cliched aspects. That said, again, I still didn't necessarily hate the second act of this movie, and overall, I really enjoyed myself throughout the film. Although it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of this movie was made up, especially a lot of moments in that second act, it really does nail the overall vibe and attitude that made Bob Marley one of the greatest artists of all time. I'm gonna give Bob Marley One Love an A-. It is kind of amazing how during the same weekend, we got both the first awful movie of the year and the first great movie of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best, and don't forget to click subscribe and click that bell icon down below to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.